I'd like to spend a little bit more time driving home the difference between creating a function and calling a function. This might be a little bit of a review from the past videos, but I really want to make sure that the point is clear because it will become more important when we talk about more advanced concepts like scope and closures. So let's start off with the example say hello function that I have here. I've declared it at the top level of the program, so it's in the global scope, and I've created a variable called say hello and assigned it to this function. And so at the time that I use this function keyword and assign it to some variable, then I am creating this function. So this is function create time. And this is when an object, a function object, gets created and put onto the heap, as we've talked about before. So over in the console, I can see that the function has been created because I can reference it using its variable identifier. And you can see what I get back here is the actual function value. Now, if I want to call the function, I can call it like this, and we say that this is function call time. And so when I call the function, the runtime enters into the function body, and it returns the string hello world. Now let's make this example a little bit more complicated by having the say hello function return another function. This time I'm going to get rid of this statement here, and instead of executing any code inside of here, I'm just going to return a new function object. So I'm going to do an inline expression here, and I'm going to name the function inner. And then that function will return hello world from inner. Let's walk through this and make sure that it's clear. When this JavaScript file first runs, in other words, we load it into the browser, the JavaScript engine is going to parse the file and evaluate the code that's inside of it. And so at the top level here, this function will get created, say hello. But we haven't called say hello yet, and so the inside of the function will not execute until we actually call say hello like this. So at this point, the outer function say hello has been created, but this function inside of here has not been created yet because we haven't actually called the say hello function. So let's create the inner function and get a reference to it over in the console. I'll start off by just typing say hello, and you see here we have a value. It's a function. It just hasn't been executed yet, and so the inner function there has not actually been created. It's just code waiting to execute. This time around, I'm going to create a variable called inner, and let's call the say hello function. Now what gets returned is a new function. So a new function has been added to the heap or to our memory, and it's been returned and assigned to this variable called inner. Now, if I created another variable, let's just call it inner2. Now another function has been created. It's also called inner, but we actually have two functions on the heap now. One of those functions is assigned to the inner variable, and so we have inner, and that points to a function in memory. And then we have another variable called inner2, and that points to a new function in memory, so we have two. So this function inside of here is created when the say hello function is called. Now we can call the inner function that gets created simply by using the call syntax. So I can call inner like this, and we can do the same with inner2, which will execute the same code, except it will be a new function. So each one of these is its own function in memory, but I can call each of them like this. So far we just have one inner function, but we can return as many nestings of functions as we want, and we can even create new functions inside of this one like this. Just to demonstrate, I'll create an empty function called 1 and another one like this. So we can nest functions and create new ones inside of an outer function. In this case, let's return a couple of nestings. And maybe in this very last one, we'll return hello, the string hello. And so we've created sort of a Russian doll nesting of these functions, one returning another one, and so on. Now this time, if we go over to the console and let's just create a variable called 1. And what we get back is a newly created function that was created at the time that we called say hello. And we're seeing that here. So this function here is created again at the time that we call the say hello function. So now what I want to do is to call this function. So I'll come over to the console and we'll call 1, and let me assign the result of that to 2. Okay, now we get back the function that's inside of that one. And we can create another variable called 3 and call 2. And now we get back the final inner function. And so every time we call the function that gets returned, a new function gets created, and that one ends up getting returned. And so ultimately, we can call the final function here, and we get back our string hello. So if you're coming from a class-based language like Java or C++, this is probably pretty confusing to you, namely because functions in JavaScript are first-class objects, and we can create them at any time. And so they're just like variables that would be a number or a string. In this case, what's happening is when we call the say hello function, we're creating a couple of new functions. And then down here, we're returning a nesting of functions. And so the inner functions don't actually get created until the outer functions get called. So play around with this in the console a little bit and get really familiar with the difference between creating a new function and calling a function.